Welcome to the Tao of Sports podcast, featuring sports industry leaders from across the globe, focusing on the world of sports business. Now, here is your host, Troy Kirby.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Sports podcast. I'm Troy Kirby, along with episode 287 of the podcast. Now, today's guest is Mike Veeck. He is part of a bloodline that has really helped make baseball and sports a lot more fun than they used to be. Realistically, he's number 3 in that bloodline. There is Night Train, who I've had on the show before early on, and there was, of course, Mike's father, which was Bill Veeck, and then, of course, William Lewis Veeck Sr., who was with the Chicago Cubs and the originator of Ladies' Day and a few other crazy things, which we talk about with Mike Veeck. I thought it was interesting, because in a way I'm not only talking to Mike Veeck, but I'm also talking about his father, because his father's not here to really talk about some of the crazy, outlandish promotions that he did during his time. I know there are going to be people that go, who is Mike Veeck? But if you are in marketing and you don't know who Mike Veeck is, and you haven't read The Hustler's Handbook, you haven't read Veeck is in Rec, or even one of my favorites, which is 30 Tons a Day, you really are doing yourself a disservice. That is something that not only holds up to this day, but realistically talks about one thing that we miss, is that fans come for fun, not just for sports. And that's very important, especially in this day and age when we have lack of ticket redemption and a lot of other things going on. And I wanted to read one of the quotes from Bill Veeck, and I thought that was an interesting quote to kind of include in this. I know this is an interview with Mike Veeck, but he talks a lot about his father, and it's really that nuance of getting from Mike really what his dad was like. And here's what I'll say. We can't always guarantee the ball game is going to be good, but we can guarantee the fan will have fun. And I think that's an important distinction. Too often, people weigh on the standings. They don't weigh on the experience. And I think that's probably something that is missing, that is going to either have to come back, or there's going to be a lot of hardship in the future when HDTV and streaming really dominates beyond what it's doing already, as well as social media. Now, Mike Veeck talks a lot about that, but he also talks about really things that he learned from his father and his father learned from his father, but also exactly what is good marketing and how do we make that thing called social media really work for us to get fans into the game rather than just having them sit at home on their couch or just using their smartphone, their tablet, etc. Great conversation with Mike Veeck, who, realistically deserves a lot of credit for making baseball fun, especially since his father's been gone, right here on episode 287 of the Tao of Sports.
Did you know that there are Tao of Sports podcast episodes that you may not be getting as an iTunes subscriber to the podcast? That's because the Tao of Sports podcast offers additional premium episodes per week. These episodes include some of the premium executives in the sports world and are not available to the public. Plus, you get full access to all of our cataloged episodes that you may have missed. And at $1.99 for a month, or $4.99 for a yearly subscription, it's both affordable and helps to support the podcast. Subscribe today at TroyKirby.com.
Mike, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. When we talk about marketing aspects, are really teams doing it right collectively, or is there still a little bit of a drop-off in understanding really what drives a fan out to a game beyond just the game itself?
Well, I think it depends. There's several camps. For example, let's start with my Major League brethren. I spent 10 years in the big leagues with 4 different clubs, so I'm not taking a shot without knowing from whence I came. But if you have a 5-year-old young woman a young girl who is absolutely enthralled by the game of baseball, watches with her mom and dad a couple times a week, you have to grant her access. She has to be able to access her heroes. And as the major leagues become more expensive, and one might even say a little more elitist, that's very difficult. On the other hand, minor league baseball has a huge opportunity because of that void. And of course, we don't just train people for field activities in the minor leagues. We don't just develop players, we develop fans. So there we have a chance to make sure that 5-year-old gets a baseball, that 5-year-old gets time in front of the dugout with one of her heroes, and then you have a fan for life. Now, I think also you have to take into account the social media, which has made it so much easier to connect with the fans, but also adds to the isolation. And how we deal with this in the next 3 to 5 years, I think, is going to be paramount in our marketing. And by that, I mean we're going to have to work at customer service harder than we ever have before, both Major League and minor league, because people are going to be able to access via their phones and via their iPads the game. So what do we offer them that's different? We offer them comfort. We offer them service drives the experience, which drives the memory. People love baseball. They can watch it on television all they want, but they have to experience the live game to really get it, the smells and the sounds and just the ceremony, the ballet of it. So I think customer service is the bedrock. I think that as my friend Dan McGallis says, I think that social media is the Wild West right now, and somebody who figures out how to tame that animal is going to be the next generation of great marketers. But underneath it all, great ideas and the basics of a marketing plan, target audiences, and most importantly, how you get them in and how you keep them happy while they're there. That's important.
Well, minor league baseball has typically done gangbusters in a lot of areas, especially with attendance, but also with overall promotion and doing different things and dynamic things, whereas Major League Baseball has kind of stayed a little bit more stolid. Has that actually cost, the majors to really kind of just do the bobbleheads and not really the kind of the silly promotions?
Well, I always use the example of my partner and pal Bill Murray as a perfect example. When he takes the coach's box or throws out the first pitch at Wrigley Field, there is no difference than when he signs an autograph for a kid in one of our ballparks, say in Charleston or Fort Myers or St. Paul. And my point is, you don't differentiate between Major League humor and minor league humor. Are there things that you can't do at the Major League level? Absolutely. Have they become more sedate as the money gets bigger? Absolutely. Are the players less inclined to involve themselves? Absolutely. So there's no question that for the first time in my life, in what I laughingly call my career, ideas are swimming upstream. As soon as the minor leagues come up with a great idea, their Major League brethren are watching. As soon as they can monetize it, then it takes off, which is very good for both camps. We're developing talent at an unprecedented rate in the minor leagues, in the front offices, men and women who are coming up with tremendous ideas, and that will break that barrier. I mean, the old man, Bill, my dad, I don't know if I'd call him silly. I certainly would call a lot of the promotions he did intellectual. Did they tickle your fancy? Usually, hopefully. But underneath there was a tremendous intellectual bedrock going on, and people got it. And I do think that's missing. I think that clubs take more and more chances. Are going to be the leaders in the industry as they go forward.
Has that been something, though, that you mentioned your father's time when he was really fighting against really kind of the brass that didn't want to see all these experiential type of promotions? Has sports finally grown into a business to where people understand that there has to be other ways to drive people out other than the game itself?
Yes. It has changed. Never as quickly as would suit me, never as quickly as I think would suit a lot of people. There are more and more women involved, which is very good for the game on any number of levels. 54% of our ballparks attendees in Charleston, for example, are female. So we have a heavily female front office because they know what we should be doing. So that's a change that has been for the good. But there are still remnants of people who really view this like the grand old game, in quotes. And I think that that's disastrous. If people are willing to give you 3 hours of their time, then you better give them something, especially if you don't win, especially if you don't have marquee players. I mean, every single day that we wake up, I laugh with my son, night trainers with the White Sox. You know, they've got a marquee player, even in spite of their disastrous season last year. And so people wake up thinking about the White Sox. But he came out of a minor league background, almost 1,000 games he worked for the River Dogs in Charleston. And here you wake up every morning without a single person thinking, boy, I really can't wait to see what the River Dogs do today. You got to grab them by the throat and get their attention. And it's become a huge business. I mean, let's face it, $8 or $9 billion is an awful lot of money for this industry. But underneath it all, the people who will be successful are the people who still recognize that this is a game. It's a wonderful game, maybe the most wonderful game ever invented. It's not like opening a shopping center. It's not just dollars and cents.
One of the things that the adages that have been kind of said throughout the years is that an empty seat is a cancer to your brand. But my question is, with ticket redemption being down, where they have bought the ticket but they have decided to go to something else, isn't that like empty calories, to where we actually, we're taking in the money, but we're actually costing ourselves long term with the people that aren't showing up because they will find something better to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's the age-old, and that's why, you just put your finger on what makes this such a fascinating, not just game, but industry is. It always comes back to that seat. It always comes back to, are we doing enough to attract attention to make those people say, I can't miss this? My dad never announced a promotion. Then when we were in Chicago together, we needed to know that we were going to do 20,000 people, which still left us 20,000, seats short. So you absolutely have to do both. You have to sell those tickets, but that's where great promoters come in. Then you have to give them a reason to come. And one of the things is ball clubs have to take their brand to the street. And by that I mean they have to make every appearance that they possibly can. You and I should be out this morning doing a communion breakfast. On lunchtime, you go to the Rotary and someone goes to the Kiwanis. Every single ball club has something that most businesses don't have, and that is people are interested in sports. They want to hear. So you need to take your message out of the building. And that's the way that you fill those empty seats. It comes down to, do I promote heavily on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or do I use the Spolster approach and sell out my weekend and then worry about my overflow? I mean, that's a fascinating study. But you got to fill those seats, and promoting is the way you do it. And once they get in the door, customer service is the way you get them back.
During the 1990s, there was really a focus on making as many calls as you could, really turn it into an inside sales model. It's something of an effect that has finally caught on with colleges. My question is, does that even work in today's environment, to where people aren't really answering the phone the same way they used to, and realistically hitting a bunch of worked over numbers 30 times in a year? Does that really translate to the fans we want, and is that misguided?
Well, that's an interesting an interesting question, and that's what makes this fun. I'm pleased that you asked me to be on. Yes, I still think it works, and I'll tell you why. People don't expect to get a personal call anymore. I'm not going to buy tickets based on a text. I'm not going to buy tickets based on an email. I'm not going to buy tickets until I have some kind of human connection. Do I think that the boilerplate works? No. There are major league teams that used to pride themselves, and it's during the 90s, of which you speak. And here was a typical conversation. We just got a guy from Merrill Lynch. He can make 80 calls a day. Guy's something. We're selling product. They didn't know they were selling baseball bonds. They had no idea. That boilerplate doesn't work. But calling up and leaving a message that said, hey, look, I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I have a great idea for you. If you can figure a way to give me 10 or 15 minutes, I shan't disappoint you. Thanks a lot. Go Reds. See you. Boom. Over and out. That is something that I think all of us crave. I'm sitting here waiting to talk to you, and I'm writing handwritten thank you notes to my fans in St. Paul, to our fans, the Saints fans in St. Paul, for buying season tickets. When was the last time you got a handwritten note thanking you for buying a season ticket? Is it hokey? I guess. Is it old-fashioned? It certainly is. But I can't tell you the last time I got a handwritten note thanking me for spending money anywhere. And I think that more and more as we isolate with all of these machines of efficiency, we're going to look more and more for the human touch. So I think the phone is going to be more selective, but I think it's going to make a comeback. Is it going to be a boiler room? Not a chance.
Is that where you'd say the human touch might actually be one of the ways to overcome and help, really ensure long-term attendance and growth in your product?
Well, I sound like I sound like a parent, and I am. And in this case, I'll use my son as an example. They tell me that he's very witty. That's hard for me to imagine. But they tell me that, on Twitter with his tweets, he's very witty. But I notice when I can manage to follow him that he always figures a way to invite someone to a ball game. He always invites somebody to have a beer or to have a conversation or to have a cup of coffee. And I think that becomes the most potent sales tool in the world. Greg Lynch, a fellow I met when we were both laboring in every sense of the word for the now Rays, but then Devil Rays, used to make 100 calls a day, but he'd stay until 9 o'clock at night, and he would talk to someone for an hour if they wanted that. So I think that we're going to have a huge advantage. Think about the in-park experience also. Someone's hit by a foul ball that you don't catch right away, or a secondary or tertiary problem arises from a ball in the stands. With Twitter, you can get there in a moment, but ultimately what solves your problem, ultimately what makes your next sale is that touch. I do think there's a huge advantage right now for minor league baseball in terms of that approach.
So how does live sports really overcome that HDTV, that streaming competition? Is it really just through promotion and fan experience, or is it an overall customer experience, that kind of value?
I think we have to look at it and say, this is here to stay. I've lived now long enough, which I still find amazing, that the halftime show, is Bruno Mars, and that it was the Rolling Stones, and so things change, and so this wired that Marshall McLuhan, laid the basis for in the 60s, we are now totally connected. That's the way the world is. I don't think we want to compete with it. I think we want to enhance the experience. I think we want to find ways to utilize and to exploit the weaknesses that video represents. And, you can curve the screen. You can make it 72 to 140 inches. But ultimately, what you're dealing with is an experience. You're dealing with a passion. You're dealing with someone who wakes up and says, God, I love the Yankees this morning. And you have to reach out and figure a way to touch them while providing them with all of the connection that they need.
We had the Akron Rubber Ducks. They changed from the Akron Arrows this year, and a lot of people got upset by the fact that they were changing their name to such a silly name. My question is that something that's really been lost on the social kind of media sphere, is that really we have fun with things like that? I mean, has it really become to where people get a little more upset and it compounds negativity rather than just having fun with it?
Well, let's take society. This is very strange, but let's take society as a whole. If you watch television, when we came up with Fun is Good, which of course with that I had stolen from Theodore Geisel and the wonderful Dr. Seuss series, Fun is Good. And we talked about fun, and we talked about being silly, and we talked about Tanya Harding mini that night and giving away a vasectomy on Father's Day, anything that we could that was outrageous and that was silly and that would make people laugh, occasionally make them think. Those were things that were designed to make people laugh, because I find that to be the great unifier. Now I ask you right now, ask yourself, the last 35 commercials that you've seen before, while you're waiting for a YouTube, while you're, God forbid, watching television, 20 of them talk about we're having fun. What does that tell you? That tells you that fun in our society is in a short supply. Everybody's going, hey, it's the era of football. Football is the national pastime. It is. We're at war. Whenever we're at war, it reflects in our society. Baseball is pastoral. During the 70s, there was a huge debate as I was growing up, is Major League Baseball dead? We were in Vietnam. We were a country ripped apart by this silly war that never was a war. And those 50,000 veterans, weren't treated the way. Football reigned. So we are a reflection, sports, of our society. There's an ebb and a flow. So right now, people are demanding fun. People are demanding heartfelt, straightforward dealings. The era of the 90s, notwithstanding, the performance of the Wolf of Wall Street or whatever it is, people really want to shake hands and do a deal without lawyers. And I think that marketing has to be the same way. I just think that fun is the great healer.
So let's develop a specific marketing tactic. How would you develop really marketing for a team for a night? What are some of the things that you're going to look for? Is it really something that's in the national news? Is it really just fun? What is it that really impacts to make something that you would kind of say, okay, this is where we would go with it?
What's our favorite? And obviously, you're in the business, we're in the business. What's our favorite list? People who cancel. People who used to buy tickets and got angry with our performance, got angry about something, and stopped coming, canceled their tickets, right? So we take 500 of those people, and we call them, and we invite their kids. We don't invite them. We invite 500 people's kids. Let's say that's 2.5, so let's say it's 1,250 kids. And we invite them just to come out to the ballpark, and we set up all kinds of softball games and real baseball and badminton if they want it. We'd like to reacquaint a new generation. We loused it up with you, but we don't want to louse it up with them. And then years ago, even though the Twins turned it into kids' opening day, what we did was we had the kids in Fort Myers, including my then, 8-year-old son, Night Train. We had them run the whole ballpark. They parked cars. They did everything but obviously run the deep fryers and sell beer. So what I would start with was a promotion that had real heart and that wasn't designed to sell a ticket that day. I would build a relationship. In other words, it would be customer service. It wouldn't be relationship marketing and all the things we love to throw around or activation. It would just be Bring your kids out. These are all people who used to be fans of the St. Paul Saints and no longer are. Come on out. See how we've changed. We'd like to meet your kids. We'd like to. Then you have an event for them during the season. And I think that's how you build relationships. The national publicity, people just don't understand. That is designed for two things. One, to make people laugh, and two, to get national sponsors interested. It's much easier when you do an umpireless game and they mention your sponsors to sell another large sponsor if you got a little press. People think that it's, Lord knows, I'm accused constantly of self-promotion. Guilty as charged. Absolutely. Anytime we can get one of our clubs in the paper, we have a chance to say to another sponsor, look at this. We can do this for you. We will do this for you. That's the fun of the game, is trying to figure it out. And when you don't, you have to say to them, hey, I'm not as good as I thought.
That's a good segue to a lot of marketing aspects have been to where for a while they were doing deep discounts or complimentary tickets. Is that really a wrong-headed approach to think that price point is going to entice people rather than something that is actually kind of more experiential promotions like a Super Troopers or whatever else is coming out to the game that night?
Well, this is a lifetime. I am not the right person to ask. I am terrible at this. Everybody has their Achilles heel, and I have more than my share. I mean, I have tremendous shortcomings, and one of them is I never know what to charge. But I can tell you that 8 people have changed my life by looking at me when I want to offer a deep discount, and they say, do you think this show is worth $6? And I look at them and go, every bit of it. And they say, then why are you doing this? And I come up with all the reasons. But by and large, I believe that at all of our clubs, of the current 6 or 7 of which I'm involved right now, people get their money's worth. People get what that show is valued at. And I like to think we undervalue it. At the major league level, I'm not so certain. The prices, I think, have become prohibitive. We invented skyboxes on the south side of Chicago in the 70s because we needed revenue, never thinking that they can go for the, amounts that they're going for. So you'd have to speak to somebody who's an expert ticketing mogul on the major league end. On the minor league end, I don't care about giving them away if it's for a charity. I think that we owe one another. It's the milk of human kindness. Discounting, buy 500 and we'll give you something off. Deep discounting, I think sends a bad message. It says, I'm not really secure in the product I'm selling you, so I'm going to knock a little bit of it off. That's one man's opinion.
Do you still want a shot at major league promotions, or are you more comfortable in the minor leagues?
It's always, I've been with 4 major league teams, and I love my, almost 3 years in Detroit with Dave Dombrowski, and obviously I had a lot of fun in the 70s with the White Sox. I didn't have so much fun with the Rays in 90. A certain club, a club that, could use some help, I'd find it a great challenge. But I don't need it for the ego, and I did need it after I didn't get back into baseball for 20 years after disco demolition. I answered that question very differently. I would have done anything to get back. That was all ego. Now it's kind of the fulcrum rests on, is it interesting? Is it something that would be a lot of fun? I love minor league baseball for any number of reasons. The access, I love it for the proximity, I love it for the fans' experience and the operators' experience with the fans. It's a two-way street. But I do think that you can take a great number of those aspects to the major leagues. So that does intrigue me. Customer service at the major league level can always get better. Customer service at the minor league level can always get better. Right club, right situation, averaging 14,000. I might give it one more shot.
What did you learn from the Rays experience, and what did you learn from the Tigers experience that either was negative or positive?
Well, we'll take the Rays first, and we'll take them in sequential, as they would say. The Rays, because I was so desperate to return to Major League Baseball after 20 years, we came up with a campaign called Off the Wall, and we had to introduce the campaign. We had a player actually velcroed. I believe Randy Wynn actually velcroed to a billboard to unveil, and we had Jose Canseco doing a commercial making fun of taking the governor off a golf car. So Off the Wall was the advertising campaign. It was picked as the best campaign for the first 10 years of the Rays' history. I tell you that for no other reason but to put this in perspective. And that is, I went in and said, we're going to use this line off the wall, and by God, it's going to draw people. Well, it drew people. It really did work. The problem was when they get to the ballpark, we weren't off the wall. We were the most uptight, non-fan-friendly organization. And the mistake was mine. I thought by saying we were off the wall that we would be. The Tigers, on the other hand, the year we lost 119 and threatened the Mets record, taught me that not quite all press is great. I used to believe in just get the logo in there, get the brand name, and we'll suffer the consequences. But the national trucks moved in a week before the end of the season to see the Tigers break the Mets record. And that was a tough year. Keeping my yap shut with all that national media around was really tough.
In terms of the St. Paul Saints, that's been shown as a successful venture because of the fact it's an unaffiliated baseball, so therefore unaffiliated baseball typically doesn't get the recognition that it really is a small business that works if you know what you're doing. Has that been something of a little bit of a kind of, I guess, a notch in your belt that now they're going to a new stadium? There is a new progression in that type of atmosphere, that it has worked in a place that, you know, realistically it worked all along, but had always been kind of one of those things that had never gotten recognition before the promotions and everything else had gone around.
Well, I really fell in love in St. Paul, and it was kind of like, you know, my old man was a Chicago guy through and through. But his first club was Cleveland, winning. And you just never forget. There's always something special about it. And when we opened in St. Paul, I'll never forget Andy McPhail, then running the Twins, said, you know, the Saints will be out of business in 45 days. And we got pounded pretty good in the press. Independent baseball, what's that? You know, before the age of television, there were 540-some ball teams all around the country, and a huge number of them independent. And there were town ball leagues and things like that. We started the ball club, and we based it simply on what the fans wanted. And 21 years later, in 2015, we move into a new ballpark with a startling design, I might add, that I think will wake some people up. But it was based on, you know, we sold every ticket to every game for, 10 years, and we've done a 95% occupancy over the 21 years, sent 114 players back to major league organizations, 19 back to the big leagues, including Kevin Millar, who started his career with the Saints, or Darryl Strawberry, who rescued his career. So on every level, St. Paul and independent baseball has been it just feeds all the aspects of your soul, of all the things about the game that you love, because here in Charleston, the Yankees decide who plays third base. In St. Paul, George Samus, our manager, and Marv Goldklang and Bill Murray and I, we decide who plays third base. And so we get a fix of the baseball that's inherent in all of us also. So it's been a wonderful trip. I love the idea that everybody said, it'll never work, and it did. And now it's time to, figure out something new.
So with your early experiences with your father and, growing to work with him at the White Sox, did that actually help you and with your son who is growing in the business as well to understand kind of really how to work with somebody, that's your child, but you still have to let them grow?
Yeah, it was, my dad by osmosis was a great teacher. He was not Ward Cleaver, and I certainly was not the Beef. I mean, we were combative with each other. I couldn't figure out, I really didn't want any part of a baseball career. I was just flattered that he invited me to work a couple years, and I ended up staying a long time. But he did not encourage his children to go into baseball. And I did the exact opposite. Once I saw that Night Train had a love for it and that Rebecca had a love for it, we were a family really that has grown up together and individually around the game, and I did encourage it. I thought that it was the most wonderful way that a man or a woman could make a living. My dad, on the other hand, felt it was a wonderful way, but he knew how hard it was and how many years you can go, unemployed, or you can go trying to get back in. And so I've tried to balance it. But working with Night Train was a piece of cake. There's a certain point where a young man or a woman, they know what they're doing. The best thing that older folks can do is stay out of the way. And when they want to know something, they'll come and ask. I'm a great believer in this generation. These kids, I teach part-time at the Citadel, a graduate class and an undergraduate class, and these kids are smarter than I ever thought of being. And they're more interested, they're more connected to the world, they know more about what's going on, and yes, part of that is they should, because the world's a different place, it's connected. But there's a great curiosity out there, which I admire, and so I think that we're going to leave the business of sports in some really wonderful hands, and it's up to the youngsters to look. Who wouldn't want to be able to ask Dave Dombrowski a question about why he's like the cool hand Luke of dealers? I mean, he can't walk by it without making a deal. Anybody can learn from that kind of experience that you don't see on stat pages and things like that.
With Veeck is in Rec and other books, as well as Fun is Good, is that really where we get our acumen for sports business, or understanding really what it's like beyond the, I guess what I'd call it, the Bill Jamesian type of stats geek, this is how we're going to run a team and move a roster? I mean, has there not been enough, I guess, books or really development tools built to really showcase exactly what you need in order to have the sales skills or the skills in general to operate a baseball team?
Yeah, for example, I think that Veeck is in Rec holds up, but the Hustler's Handbook, if you're interested in the art of a deal, is a much better book. And I think that there are very few primers, if you will, that give you such a glance inside, under the curtain, behind the veil, Ball 4, another book. The downside of our connectivity right now is that time. Time is a very precious commodity, and I think that we all need to take a deep breath and find a couple of books to read and learn and listen to that inner voice, because we are selling a child's game. And you do have to maintain some of those childlike skills that we all have. We're all born with them. by 5 and 6, we're learning to put on these masks. But the most successful people in this business, I believe, are the people who are very straightforward, who love it, who say, this is what I can do, and who always challenge the status quo. The day of it being because we do it this way, hopefully is ending with this generation. And that is deadly. It doesn't matter what business you're in. We do it this way because, change is the thing that makes sports so different. What hangs in the balance? The swing of a season, the swing of a bat, Big Papi, and boom, dreams are dashed. And front offices should be the same way, flexible, based on change rather than based on tradition. And I think that we arm ourselves very well for tomorrow if we make sure that we embrace change and that we don't view it as it was when I was growing up as a knock at the status quo.
Isn't that, though, the message of 30 tons a day, to where essentially, regardless of whether it's baseball or horse racing, you still have the opportunity to do new things when people are telling you no, because of the fact that you keep fighting through it and doing new promotions or new things that people say won't work against the status quo?
Well, the greatest, the sweetest thing, as we discussed with St. Paul, was it won't work. Hey, it worked. And what happens is you get worn down. I've gone seasons without a great promotion, without a great idea, and it just cuts me to the quick. You have to keep battling. You have to keep trying things. You have to keep, people call, I can't remember the terrible name, but in Charleston, 10 or 15 years ago, I just found this the other day in one of my desk drawers, we had fans ordering their concession items by phone. Cell bucks, it was called, by 15 years ago. And I want to tell you, it was one of the great disasters. It's one of the great disasters since, Sherman wandered through Atlanta. People didn't like it. People got their food 3 hours later. They were gone by the time they got it. But the point is that it was different, and we tried it. Did it work? No. Is it the norm now? Yes. So that's the kind of thing that you have to keep trying. And once you have, we're a nation that worships mediocrity. It doesn't matter if we don't come up with something great, as long as we don't fail. And I think that's, the wrong approach. It's a game, for God's sakes. That's the wonderful thing. You get to wake up the next morning and start all over again. And when you walk in to a restaurant or you walk into a saloon and you're having a great time, do you spend more money?
I think so.
So do I. People who are happy, people who are laughing, people who are engaged spend more money. So where am I missing something in this algorithm, as they like to say? If people are happy, they're spending more. And if people aren't happy, they leave. Or worse, they don't come. So make them laugh, make them cry, make them think, and make them laugh on the way out the door.
Dan McGullough had mentioned your father's involvement in the creation of the season ticket. I was wondering if you'd like to expand on that and kind of tell me, is he the person that actually started getting us down this road of season tickets? Were there season tickets before then, or how did that actually work?
Well, I think that it's kind of like the shorts. A guy by the name of John Carberry put his team in shorts a couple of years before the White Sox tried them in 1976. And good hustlers, of which my old man was a very good hustler, you adapt and you utilize things. It was actually built on his dads, who ran the Cubs. Recognition that in the off season you didn't have money to keep going. You had to go to the bank and beg, and then you pledged against upcoming sales. So if we sold these tickets in advance, you could keep everyone on, and it wasn't a seasonal business. But I believe the contribution and the idea came more from my grandfather, actually, than from my dad.
Your grandfather doesn't really get mentioned as much. That you're actually the third in the Veeck kind of bloodline of baseball. Really, has that been a lot of press built on your father's books and less on, the contributions? Because your grandfather was the one that put in ivy in, Wrigley Field.
Yeah, but actually it was Dad who planted the ivy under Wrigley's watch. But Mr. Wrigley gave him a job after my grandfather died. But my grandfather, for example, suggested the use of orange baseballs long before Charles O., with Oakland, wore the mantle. And that's what I mean, contributing. Grandfather Veeck came up with Ladies' Day with the Cubs long before anybody heard of such a thing, and he did some tremendous crowds. He was very, now they'd say that he was uptight. He was very proper. William Lewis Veeck was very proper. And Dad took one look at that and said, I'm never going to wear a tie, and I'm going to go the opposite direction. But William Lewis Veeck, Sr., taught my father the single most important lesson about sports marketing, and he took him down into the bowels of Wrigley Stadium, of Wrigley Field, and he dumped a whole tray of money out, and he looked at my dad and he said, Bill, what's the color of that money? And my father looked at him and looked at his father, and he said, it's green. And my grandfather said, what's the color of the person who put that money in this till? And my father looked at the green money, and he looked at my grandfather, and he said, I don't know. And my grandfather said, don't you ever forget it. So does that make him the king of diversity? Not really. Does it make him a good businessman? Absolutely. Is it apocryphal? No. That's the way that it happened. How do I know that? Because my dad told me that, and he never lied. And so, I think that passing this game along from marketer to marketer is what makes it special. You build on an idea, you build and then hand it off to someone else. But grandfather definitely doesn't get his due. Obviously, it was 100 years ago.
So I guess look in the future and kind of tell me what you expect from both Major and Minor League Baseball as a whole. Are we drawing attendance numbers, or are we going to struggle? What's going to be the difference between the two organizational kind of aspects of promotion?
Well, I think that we're going to have to. I think that ultimately we're going to, pay on performance. I think that there'll be some guidelines using, as you referenced, the Bill James statistical approach. You hit 40 home runs, you get this. I think that that dollars have to equal out somehow. I'm not suggesting that there be limitations on free agency signings or things like that. Quite the reverse. I'm saying that you're paid on your performance. I think there's going to be a slight dip in fans. I think that we've lost a generation in terms of it being a game that's connected the way it was when I was growing up. So I think we'll have to double down in terms of our service. I think the social media will shake out, and we'll kind of figure out how to manage this in connection with. I think that the X Games are teaching us a great deal. I think Dan McGall is wandering into cricket. They had 48,000 or something the other night, just an astounding coming to see a fireworks show and the like in Australia. So I think that it's very much a globalization. I think there'll be a true World Series. But the key to both Major League and Minor League marketing are the kids, in my opinion. And we're going to have to come up with more than just, hey, on Sunday the kids eat free. I think we really have to do some psychological evaluating and testing to see how we bring new fans in. Read that to say I think there'll be a woman somewhere that will obviously break that barrier more and more, making their way in the front office. Which is very good, and I think some major league teams will take more chances and market harder rather than laying back and waiting for performance. I do think the days of people saying, we're not winning, are on the wane, and that's very good. Because look at the Tigers. They drew 3 million. They were so close. And, if you have a couple of seasons like that, it's your service that's ultimately going to draw. Or when you get lousy like the White Sox last year, their attendance dropped. You have to combat that by servicing people. And so I think we're in very good shape.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for a fantastic podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, I had great fun, and thanks for the depth of the questions. You really made me work. I'm sweating.
Well, it should be fun because fun is good, right?
I was just going to say, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Sports podcast, focusing on the world of sports business. Download our free iPhone, iPad app in the iTunes App Store, an Android app available on Amazon to listen to the entire archive. Or check out sportstao.com for more podcasts, blog posts, and videos. All episodes of the Tao of Sports podcast are copyrighted and trademarked.